Alright kids, this video is going to be a little bit long, so let's just go ahead and skip to the intro. The big idea here is that geographers study the world by understanding maps and geographic features of the Earth. To show you what I'm talking about, I'm gonna need my globe again. You'll notice that on this globe there's a bunch of lines that are circling around. Now thankfully they don't exist in real life, but they're used to help locate things. We call these lines a grid, and they're imaginary lines that circle the Earth in east to west and north to south directions. The lines that go east to west are called lines of latitude, and the lines that go from north to south are called lines of longitude. Now you'll notice that the lines of latitude and longitude have lines that are parallel to each other. Parallel here, of course, meaning that they go into the same degree in the same direction. In latitude, we would call these lines parallels. In longitude, we confusingly call them meridians. To help you understand and remember that, meridians come from the Latin word merides, which means midday. So the way you could think about that is meridians mean midday, meaning high noon, which means they are lines that go from up to down, like if it were noon on an analog clock, which might not be useful for you guys, considering that you guys are not that old and you're probably using digital clocks. So in the middle of the Earth, you have a line of latitude that's called the equator, which is an imaginary line that divides the world into north and south halves. That line runs from the North Pole all the way down to the South Pole and all the way back around. Similarly, you have a line of longitude that's called the prime meridian. Now, unfortunately, my globe doesn't actually have a prime meridian on it because I spent $5 for about 6 of these beach balls. So we're just going to pretend or put it up here on the green screen behind me. So the prime meridian divides the Earth into east and west halves, much to the chagrin of many textbook manufacturers. It starts in Greenwich, England, and goes all the way around the world and wraps back over to itself. When you measure the distance away you are from the equator or the prime meridian, you would call this a degree, which is how far away you are from each of these lines. When you want to measure the distance between 2 degrees, so between 2 of these lines, you would measure them in what are called minutes. And if you're getting bored of me talking about lines, I promise I only have one more term left before I move away from talking about lines. So finally, we have hemispheres, which divide the globe into 2 halves. See, I told you, that was it. Now, let's talk about these big old things that are on the globe that aren't blue. See these things right here? These are what are called continents. And if you see all these blue things, they're called oceans. Okay, now I know you know what these things are called, so we are moving on. Next, we're going to talk about map projections, which are ways that we put our round planet on a flat map. Like we talked about during the last Rad Dudes of Geography, the world is round. However, we still need to have a flattened version of it so we can carry around maps while also being kind of accurate. Now, first up, we've got cylindrical projections. So when you think of cylindrical, think of like cylinders. So think of how this mug is mostly shaped and how it kind of looks cylindrical like that, which is more than likely the one that you guys are used to. Think of like an old-timey pirate map, how it's all rolled up like that. So we're all used to that kind of projection, especially the one that suspiciously has North America in the middle of it and not the prime meridian. While these maps are super popular and really easy to use, they do kind of mess up the way that the land masses near the top and the bottom of the map are shown. Next up, we've got conical projections. You can even pronounce it conical projections if it makes you sort of remember it better. While they can be really hard to make these maps, they're really fantastic for mapping out areas if you're going from the east to the west direction. Next, we have the flat plane projection, which are based on a plane touching the globe on one singular point. They're great for pilots and navigators because they can show true directions, but honestly, I think these maps are butt ugly and they distort the land way more than you would get on a cylindrical projection. More than likely, as a middle school student, you're really only ever going to use the cylindrical projection map. But it's really important that you guys know all of this kind of stuff. Why? You'll find out in the future. Let's talk about map features, which is like having a translation for a secret code, or whenever you watch one of those YouTube videos and it's got a big stupid red circle and an arrow on the thumbnail because your old tiny baby brain can't see where the crazy thing is. In my class, it's crucial that you read a map and understand what everything on the map means. First off, you've got the title. Usually that thing is at the top of the map and tells you what you're looking at. On page 28, we can see that this adventure and learning is probably going to be about the First Crusade, which I bet was recorded sometime around 1096. Second, you've got your compass rose, and your compass rose tells you which direction is north. Now, why is that useful? Because sometimes map makers decide they want to be tricky and they don't want to have the top of the map be north. And usually that's because they're using one of the projections that we talked about before. Now sometimes that could be for tons of other reasons, but honestly, a majority of the time your direction is going to be north is up. But make sure you're always watching out with the compass rose. Third, the scale. The map scale tells you the distance between points on a map. And four, this explains what symbols on a map mean. Like how stars can usually symbolize capitals, or like how blue lines usually indicate some sort of flowing body of water. On certain maps, they'll also show you why areas are shaded differently. And finally, we've got the locator map. This tiny map is usually tucked away somewhere, and you use it to find out where in the world you are. And that's super useful because you may not know what some parts of the world look like. You may not be familiar where Uzbekistan is, but you know where like that part of the world is if you look at that teeny tiny little map. Finally, we're going to talk about what kind of maps you might see while you're studying geography. First off, you've got political maps. Political maps show the major political features of a region, which usually represents borders, countries, states, capital cities, and a lot of other things that are determined by humans. This is the map that you're most likely familiar with, and it's the easiest to read. Think about one of those map sets of the 50 states of the United States. Next, we're going to look at physical maps, which show you the major physical features of a region. This usually includes mountain ranges, rivers, oceans, deserts, plains, and lakes. Usually they're in different colors to show you the elevation of a region that you're looking at. And finally, the last map that we're going to look at is thematic maps. These maps focus on one single topic like climate, resources, or population. Thematic maps can help show you information on a topic that's important to your region, or like physical maps, they could use different colors to symbolize what you're looking at. A lot of the time when you see a thematic map, they'll also tend to show you what like the history of a place could be. In this video, we learned that geographers study the world by understanding maps and geographic features of the Earth. Now this is the last video for Module 1, so I want to bring it all back to that first question that I asked. How does the use of geographic tools help us view the world in different ways? If you've got an answer to that, leave them in the comments, or honestly just tell me about it in class. I hope today that you've learned something about geography. Until next time, wash your hands and wear a mask. Happy painting, and God bless, my friend.